Okay, let's begin. Thanks for everyone coming online. You have myself, Niesh, and Kyle on here, and we're going to be talking about why we've been investing in Calgary. This is our weekly webinar. So first off, we'll introduce ourselves. Um, I'm Alex Wilson, owner and broker record of Remax Wealth Builders Real Estate. Been selling real estate in Toronto for over 12 years. Number one Remax agent in Canada for individual transactions in 2022. Number 11 in the world. Inducted into the Remax Hall of Fame, awarded the Remax Lifetime Achievement Award at 35, and inducted in the Remax Circle of Legends when I was 40. I turned 42 this year, but none of that is relevant. What is interesting to you is that I've since also turned a $39,300 deposit into a $17 million real estate portfolio, which includes 15 condos, a High Park triplex, and an apartment building in Hamilton. And we start off all our presentations like this because I want people to see the value of holding real estate over a long period of time. You, especially in this market where people ask us a lot of things about real estate and sales, I have great news for you. You will never lose money in real estate as long as you don't sell. And what I mean by that is never put yourself in a situation where you have to sell. And that's why I showed this slide here, where I show that today my portfolio is worth $17 million. Now, that portfolio, there's mortgages on all those properties. So what the beauty is in 30 years, all those mortgages will be paid off because they're amortized over a 30-year period. And I didn't pay those properties off. The tenants in those properties paid those mortgages off. And if I calculate at a conservative annual 3% compounded growth rate, that means my portfolio be worth $42 million in 30 years. And that will be fully paid off versus 17 million now with mortgages. So that is the beauty of real estate and holding it over time. And that's why we feel so passionate about investing in real estate and holding it over a long period of time, because we can match the expenses with an income stream. The expenses being property tax, maintenance fee, and then the interest on the mortgage and the principal repay back. And then over a long period of time, you're rewarded with a great gain in wealth. And Niesh and Kyle have been doing the same thing. So Kyle, why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. My name is Kyle DeVigi, and I've been investing in real estate for over a decade, since 2012. But my career did not start in real estate. I was actually the draws manager for Lotto 639 and Lotto Max for about 9 years. These are actual balls that were used to make millionaires. However, at my time at the Lottery Corporation, I learned that about one third of Canadians were planning to fund their retirement by winning the lottery. They're gambling on the future. So that was kind of depressing to me. And Alex and I go way back. We know each other from high school. He knows I'm passionate about real estate investing, so convinced me to go help investors build wealth through real estate instead of gambling on their future. And I've been really good at that. In 2022, I helped about 130 people. This year alone, I've helped over 160 people to start growing their real estate portfolios. And I've personally grown my real estate portfolio into 6 properties worth well over $4 million today. And like Alex said, that's going to continue to grow over the next 30 years because I don't plan on ever selling any of those. I want that to continue to grow, continuing to build in wealth and value.
And this is what Kyle has.
Yeah, so full transparency, this is my portfolio today. In the process of adding another one as well, but these are primarily pre-construction condos in the GTA, and the last one that I added was in Calgary, and that's where we are all continuing to add to our portfolios as well.
And the one you're adding, that's in Calgary as well, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And then we have Niesh, who is Mr. Calgary. Niesh, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Niesh Desanaika, long last name, but I've had practice saying it a few times, so slips right out of the tongue that way. I've been a licensed realtor since November of 2020, so just under 3 years, and had some success last year and this year as well. And really, I've been investing in real estate since 2006. Currently, I'm the landlord and owner of 6 properties, and 3 that I have a financial stake in. So in total, I have 9, 2 in the Greater Toronto Area, which is where I live, and 7 out in Calgary. And I'll talk about why shortly. Last year, up until today, I've sold over 165 investment properties in Calgary alone, in addition to my existing resale business here in Toronto. Prior to my real estate career, I worked in the entertainment industry, and I worked there for over 2 decades. It was an industry that was demolished by COVID. So we were in-person experiences. And unfortunately, when the world stopped, so did our business. Now, thankfully, I had already pivoted to getting my real estate license. So the impact wasn't dire for me. But what I did see was some of my retirement plans and the money that I had invested through my company and through their matching contributions towards my retirement, all that disappeared. And for many people that were in my company, and I guess for many people in across the globe that were depending on their companies to support them during their retirement years, all that left. So it really hit home how important it was for you to take your retirement into your own hands. And I have some numbers here, some really staggering numbers that I wanted to share. So Canada's population right now, we are just under 40 million. So it's 39 million people we have. 11% are over the age of 60. Sorry, 27% are over the age of 60, which equates to 11 million people over the age of 60. Now, why that's an important number is in previous years, like decades ago, the older population was actually less than the younger population. It kind of makes sense. But today, looking at the numbers, 9.2 million people are between the ages of 60 and 85. And if you compare that to people that are in their high earning years, which are, between the ages of 35 and 55, there are only 8.9 million people in Canada. So the older generation is now surpassing the younger generation in terms of total population. So this really means that when it comes time for you to retire, those that are still working, we may not be able to depend on the Canada Pension Plan or even our employers for our financial future and stability during our retirement stage. So as a result, the real estate component has been truly remarkable for me, and I know for many others as well. And I'm happy to share, again, through full transparency, what it is that I currently own and where I've made the biggest investments over the past, I want to say, 2 years.
And yeah, here's Niche's portfolio here. So shows everything he has.
Correct. Thank you. And the first 2, as you can see, were in 2006 and 2017, all Toronto-based. But since 2021, all the other ones that I have invested in have been in Calgary. And it's happened for a specific reason that I'm sure we're going to get into as we move on through this presentation.
And yeah, in 2022, we helped over 350 people from across Canada invest in Calgary, and our team has personally invested. That's actually more than 10 into 15 pre-construction condos. And we want to show you and how we've done this. We've done this multiple ways. But one thing I see that people are relying on their home, or some people are relying on their home as their retirement fund. Now, the issue with that is to access the equity in a home, you're going to have to sell it when you're older. But then you need somewhere to live. And time after time, again, I'm reading articles in the paper talking about senior citizens that are in their 80s that sold their homes 15 years ago. And they've been renting somewhere and they were forced to leave the property they were living in. And now they're living in a basement apartment somewhere, just barely getting by. Now the issue is they sold their homes, they sold the roofs over their heads, so they lost control over the property they live in, and they expose themselves to risk and the risk of their living expenses. So how do you mitigate that? How do you mitigate your your future expenses for the properties that you live in. Well, it's great if you have one home going up in value over time, but imagine if you had two homes going up in value or three homes going up in value, like we illustrated in our portfolios before. Our properties will be paid off in 30 years or less in some cases for ones that we had already closed on. What you can do is you've had a significant run of equity in your property, maybe you've been very diligent, maybe you have no mortgage on your property. Well, that's good. But what's the next phase of that? You could borrow against the value of your home, and that way you could have multiple homes. And those multiple homes are going up in value at the same time. And while they're going up in value, you're going to have tenants in those properties, and those tenants are paying off the properties. And that's difficult to do in Toronto now, because it's so expensive to purchase in the Toronto and the GTA. And you're going to be negative cash flow with a typical 20% down payment. But with the opportunity of positive cash flow still available in Calgary, you can do things like this and borrow equity against the house and purchase properties. And then with the excess cash flow, that'll help cover the interest expense of borrowing against your principal residence. And now you have multiple properties going up in value. And each $350,000 condo that you invest in, that represents over $24,000 of annual income in your retirement years. And that's in today's purchasing power. So that is already factored in inflation. And that it may seem that, wow, Alex has a $17 million plus portfolio, Niesh and Kyle are in the fives. That may be daunting to you. And you're like, well, how do I get there? Well, we broke it down. You don't even need to get to 17 or even 5 million. With a simple $1 million real estate portfolio, you're looking at, you could have a annual a return on that and pay yourself a salary of $70,000 a year in 30 years. Or if you had a $2 million, that's $140,000 a year you can pay yourselves, because again, those properties are paid off and just at a 5% rate of return. That's what you're going to be able to pay, and that's in today's purchasing power. That next column where I've recommended yearly payout, that's if we get into the generational wealth formula, where we recently did a webinar on that, where if you want to pass that portfolio to the next generation, pay yourself a 3% rate of return on your portfolio value. And that way now your portfolio is inflation adjusted forever. And your future generations can live off of that portfolio. So that's how you really build, the first part of it, building financial freedom, buying a portfolio, tenants pay that down, portfolio goes up in value. The next part of it, generational wealth, is saving some of that portfolio for the next generation. So now that we have you guys in the investment mindset, why are we investing in Calgary? Well, when we first started looking at Calgary, it was in 2019, and it was really interesting because when we looked at it, the pricing was very similar to when Kyle and I invested in our first properties in Toronto. So our first condos in Toronto were Queen and Gladstone, our first investment condos, and we bought them in the $260,000 range. And you couldn't do that in Toronto anymore. And you couldn't buy something with a deposit of $39,300. But I could in Calgary, and that was really interesting. So we started investigating it more, and we found out, because we knew nothing about Calgary other than it was in the West Coast, close to the Rockies. But it's the most livable city in North America, the most livable city fourth most livable city in the world, top 5 of the Economist Intelligence Unit's Global Livability Index. It's located in the foothills of the Canadian Rockies. There's loads of green space, and the most important thing, second lowest cost of living of Canadian cities and 9th lowest in North America. Something you never associate with Toronto or Vancouver, talking about a low cost of living, affordability. That's what those cities lack, are Toronto and Vancouver. But there's affordability in Calgary. So that sounded good to us. So then we wanted to make sure the population in Calgary was growing. So we are in the business of investing in roofs over heads. So if we're investing in roofs over heads, that means we need to see positive population growth in that city. And guess what? It does and continues to have positive population growth. So 2019 to 2020, it added 44,000 people. And then Even during COVID, where larger cities lost people, Calgary gained people. So in 2020 to 2021, it added 34,000, to 21 to 2022, 29,000 people. Positive population growth even through COVID. They also have money in Calgary. Calgary has the highest millionaires per capita of major Canadian cities, and they're paid a very good wage with the highest wages and salaries per employee in the country as well. But if we look into the future, this is where things get even more exciting. So that population growth is continuing to accelerate. And what is driving that? It's affordable again. So Alberta is affordable, and specifically Calgary is affordable. And Alberta's population is set to increase by 48% and will be larger than British Columbia by 2043. That's double the rate that Ontario's population is set to grow. It's set to increase by only 24%, which is still good. But Alberta is going to grow at twice the rate. And the population of Calgary will get an outsized portion of that. They're going to grow by 62.5% over the next 20 years. They're going to go from 1.6 to 2.6 million people. 1 million new people over the next 20 years will be moving to Calgary. That means we will need roofs over heads for those 1 million people. That is a very attractive sign for me to be investing in that city. And where's the migration coming from? It's coming from international, but it's also coming into provincial. So people are leaving other provinces in Canada and moving to Alberta. Kyle, what was the name of that? Oh, Alberta's Calling, right, Kyle? That was the name of their promotion when they were running on
exactly. Yep.
So, and it worked. It worked. It's affordable, and I know I've had calls. Kyle's had calls. Niesh has had calls. When we first started talking in 2019, it was people basically looking at the investment opportunity and believing on the growth story of Alberta. Now, Kyle, you still have those calls, but who else is calling you?
People considering moving to Calgary.
Yeah.
And before, I was dealing exclusively with investors. Now, probably about 1 in 5 of my phone calls are people considering moving. They've had family go there. They have friends. People are considering it. It's definitely becoming very commonplace.
Yeah. And that data that I just gave in the previous slide here, this 48% population growth in Alberta, 62.5% over the next 20 years, that's not our data. That's not the internet's data. That's Statistic Canada data. They're the ones that have mapped that out. So there's only going to be 3 provinces that are going to grow in population over the next 20 years. It's Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. And Alberta is going to grow the fastest out of those 3 for population. So again, if you're investing in roofs over heads, that's the province you want to be in. Because also not only are they going to lead in population growth, they are again affordable, which allows you to have positive cash flow and the opportunity for appreciation on the properties. So we've seen that, okay, it has strong population growth, but what about the economy? And when we started investing in 2019, again, what do we know about Calgary? We knew it was out west, but we also knew that it was oil and gas. And that's what led to the drop in property values and the opportunity, right? Like, we're buying at the bottom of the market. Well, the bottom of the market's already come. Now you're on the upward trajectory. So you're gonna continue to see prices go up. So it's a strong economy in Alberta and Calgary. And when you look at Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, those are your top 3. Calgary's number 4 in regards to economic output. Its economic output is bigger than entire provinces, is bigger than the entire province of Saskatchewan. It's bigger than the entire economic output of the province of Manitoba. It's a big player when it comes to economic output. And Alberta is set to lead Canada in economic growth, not only in 2023, but in 2024. And they're adding jobs, lots of jobs. For all those people that are moving there, they need jobs to keep the economy growing. And Alberta was number 2 for job creation in 2022, just behind Ontario. But the difference is, if we break that down per capita, it led Canada per capita for job creation and by a significant margin. They also run surpluses. So, and just even in the newspaper today, yesterday, reading it, Ontario set to run a deficit of $5.9 billion forward on a spending spree. British Columbia running a deficit. I don't remember what the number was, but it was running. They're also in deficit territory in British Columbia. Alberta, not so much. Alberta is running significant budget surpluses, a $13 billion surplus last fiscal year. And what do they do with that $13 billion surplus? They invest back in the province and they pay down existing debt. And that surplus is looking to their budgeted increase in 2023 and 2024. And that budget is based on $70 a barrel per oil. And we are higher than that. I think we're at $92 today, if I'm not mistaken. So Alberta has that backbone of oil and gas, which at current high prices allows significant budget surpluses for the province. And that allows them to create a very friendly business environment to diversify. And that's the difference now. And that's what we saw in 2019 versus when you went to the early 2014, 2015, where it was significant relying on oil and gas, and there was mass layoffs in the oil and gas industry. In 2019, it had diversified away from that, and it's using this oil revenue and investing it wisely and diversifying away. And that's what we've seen. And Kyle will talk more about the diversification away from oil and gas and the companies that are leading this charge.
Absolutely. And we are seeing this happen not just today, but over the last kind of 5 to 10 years in Calgary. This has been a story in the making. And Alex and I have seen this before. We're originally from Sudbury. They used to be live or die on the price of nickel. You used to feel it when the price was down or the mines were on strike, something like that. The economy ground to a halt. Nowadays, you barely know what's going on in the mining sector because there's so many other industries that have sprouted up and around it and built off of that historic backbone. That exact same thing is happening in Calgary and has happened to a great extent. It's no longer dependent on oil and gas. So, Alex, if you want to hit the next slide, you can talk a little bit more about it. And why is this? Well, it's because Calgary is a very highly educated workforce. They have some of the highest proportion of STEM graduates of any major Canadian city. Those STEM graduates are very useful in a lot of industries, especially tech companies. And there's a huge number of startups now in the city, over 400 in Calgary. That's amazing. They're starting to get kind of like an incubator state going. And you're starting to see big companies sprouting up about that. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But a huge factor is the low-cost office space, which is a residual from the oil and gas industry. When there was consolidation, when there were layoffs and bankruptcies back in 2015, there are still today office buildings that are empty. The city's trying to convert those over, but one of the biggest benefits is downtown real estate on the commercial side. If you're trying to rent office space, like $17.50 a square foot. That's double in Toronto, nearly triple in Vancouver. So when you're looking for an area to invest, very low office space with a highly educated workforce is a no-brainer for a lot of people. And they're starting to see results. Calgary is generating unicorns, meaning companies that are worth at least $1 billion with a B dollars. And you've got several of them here, like Neo Financial. I see them in malls all over the place trying to get subscribers and people signed up. But there's also other ones, and these are companies that have consolidated with other companies like ShareWorks with Morgan Stanley, Benevity, Parvis. So you're seeing this more and more. And when these companies are very successful, their founders like to help out their friends, their coworkers, the other people in the industry. They start to reinvest that money. And you're really starting to see that in Calgary. But not just startups. We have big international companies here setting up in Calgary. Amazon has tripled down on Calgary. They have their regular distribution warehouse. They just set up the first ever bulky and large goods warehouse in Calgary, but they're also setting up Amazon Web Services. That's IT based. Only the second one in Canada. There's only another one in Montreal. This is a multi-billion-dollar investment, hundreds of good-paying jobs, not warehouse jobs, good-paying jobs coming to Calgary. But you have TELUS. They went all in on Calgary. They built a new headquarters in downtown Calgary, 60-story building. They're hiring thousands of people across Alberta, investing $17 billion in Alberta. This is massive money. WestJet, they made Calgary the international hub for all of their flights. There's only 4 international airports in Canada, and now Calgary is one of those. Again, thousands of jobs that they're setting up by big companies. And this has nothing to do with oil and gas. And de Havilland, you probably have never heard of them, but they're actually an aircraft manufacturing company based in Toronto right now, in Downsview. That land has been sold. They need to relocate their entire operations, and they chose Calgary for their site. It's just going to be a little bit east of the city. So anything on that eastern edge of the city is going to benefit greatly from having this massive manufacturing company relocating all of these jobs, 1,500 jobs directly related to it. And it's not just manufacturing. They're going to have a training facility, education, even a museum there, 1,500 acres of land being dedicated to this. And they build water bombers. I don't know if you noticed, there were a lot of forest fires in North America this year. So they're going to be kept very, very busy and likely expanding those operations because there's going to be a bigger and bigger need due to global warming as well.
Yeah, and I think they're all booked up in orders until 2027 right now.
That's crazy. But then back to the tech companies that are moving. These aren't startups. These are big companies. Infosys, Emphasis, big Indian companies setting up operations or expanding the existing operations in Calgary. And that's what we're seeing a lot. Companies will set up a small operation and then are like, oh, wow, this is working. This is, we want to expand. We want to add on to this because it's been so successful, and seeing that time and time again. But then back to basic, TD Bank, RBC, IBM, some of the biggest companies in Canada, setting up operations in Western Canada. TD is using Calgary as their center to train all of their financial planners in Western Canada. You have other companies setting up innovation hubs in Calgary. It's all about the education, the innovation that's happening.
Now, when we look at that, and why are these companies opening up there? And why can we be confident that this is going to continue to happen? Because we've already seen it somewhere else. We've seen it already happen in the United States. And that's where we've seen companies leaving high price California, high price Silicon Valley. And we've all heard stories about San Francisco and how it's downtown, it's been hollowed out. And they're moving to low cost environments like Texas, like Florida. And if we look at Alberta, that is the option for Canada. And companies are doing that too. So why are companies leaving California? Well, they're fleeing high taxes. Well, Alberta has the lowest corporate tax rate in Canada. There's no land transfer tax or development charges, no provincial sales tax. So it's the lowest tax environment in Canada. Number two, expensive housing. Companies are leaving there because it's expensive for their employees to live, and that impacts employee morale. That impacts their efficiency, and that's where, again, Calgary comes in. We don't associate Vancouver and Toronto with affordability, but Calgary is the second lowest cost of living out of all major Canadian cities and ninth in North America. And number three, government regulations, companies leaving California to government regulations. Well, Alberta is a pro-business environment. And that's where there's no rent control there. And that's very, very attractive for us landlord investors. And on top of that, with no rent control, there's no foreign buyer tax, no land transfer tax, no provincial sales tax, no development charges, $10 billion stimulus package, including reducing corporate taxes. That's what they did at the start of COVID to really make them a desired destination to go. And not only is there no rent control, there's fixed term leases. What does that mean? Is that at the end of a lease, I can tell my tenant to leave if I wanted to sell my property. If you're dealing with that in Ontario and I tell my tenant to leave because I'm selling my property, my tenant will say, no, I don't have to leave until you issue me an N12 that someone is moving into the property. So that means I have to sell the property firm before I can issue that N12. that means I have to sell the property with the tenant in there. And then if the tenant's like, I don't want to leave, then you have to take them to the landlord and tenant board, and that'll take them 8 months to get out there. And that's opening yourself to potential lawsuits and issues with the buyers of that property because they wanted the property empty because they were going to move into it. You don't have any of those issues out there in Alberta. And on top of that, if your tenant stops paying, again, will take about 8 to 12 months for you to get them out here in Ontario. It takes about 3 weeks over there. So it's a really pro landlord, really pro business there. Now, Niesh, why don't you talk about some of the product that we have currently available in the market? This is kind of a general overview of what we have available. In the Q&A, we can elaborate a little more if people have questions on exact product, or people can book a call and we can really go into detail of the product, because there are a lot of different options out there for people. But why don't you give a quick little summary, Niesh?
Yeah, absolutely. So the option that we have with our current developers, we pretty much have everything from low-rise condos to single-family homes, freeholds that have basements that you can also rent out legally. So we pretty much have options to all of these categories. Our suburban condos, which are outside the downtown core, they can range anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes or even 20 minutes outside of the core. Typically low-rise condos, and they start in the $350,000 range, which is 12 years ago in Toronto, those prices. We also have rental guarantees with the majority of our products, which means you have an insurance policy. It can be tough to play landlord and get tenants and all those things you need to do if you are investing from outside the province. So our developer leases the unit back from you, and they pay you directly, and they will deal with the tenant for 2 years. Our deposit structures for the majority of our projects are in that 10% range. Some have 5, some have 15. There's different incentives. We also have a phenomenal downtown project called Imperial Condos. Heart of downtown, you're smack dab in the middle of everything where you want to be. It's the Beltline, so walking distance to restaurants. You have transit within minutes of your doorstep, and you can walk directly to the Calgary Tower and the Saddledome. I think it's going through a rebranding, about a $1.3 billion rebranding, but that certainly will increase the property value of your downtown condos. That's closing in 2028. Then we have townhouses as well. Townhouses that are now in the low to mid $500,000 range. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, also come with rental guarantees, scheduled out in 2026. Now, a bit of a shameless plug here. I invested in phase 1 of the townhomes, and also in the sister building of our downtown project. And especially the townhouse, my property has gone up almost $170,000 compared to what they're selling it now for. So it's one of the ones that I want to highlight specifically. And then we have freehold properties. They close starting mid-year next year all the way up until 2025. Our prices range for the freeholds in the mid $500,000 range, going all the way up to $700,000, depending on the area and size. And we also have deposit structures that are between 10 and 15%, and comes with a ton of incentives and perks as well. And our team here, we have access to all of these options for you.
Great. Niesh, why don't you get a little more into what we're seeing in the current market? This is I didn't save it. This is the August stats.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I get into the exact numbers for August, there are some similarities when you look at the Calgary market to the other larger markets in Canada, like Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. And across the board, you're going to see some increases across different categories. But truly where Calgary is different from these other 3 major markets is that they're also seeing record number of sales year over year. Their supply hasn't dwindled down where people are overbidding on properties, driving the price up. We're seeing record number of sales in Calgary, and we're seeing prices going up. So as of September, I believe year over year, sales were up almost 28%. And then we start looking at the different categories. You're looking at the overall year over year prices being just under $700,000 for those single family homes. Now, looking at the pre-construction prices versus the resale prices, yeah, we're about the same. And in some cases, the pre-construction prices are actually cheaper, which is very, very rare when you look at resale versus pre-con because of the value that pre-construction properties have, being that it's a few years down the road, being that they're brand new properties. So keep that in mind. Our townhouses as well, we're seeing some fantastic growth in townhouses. We're actually over 20%. So that's a slightly older slide or a slightly older number as well. I think townhouses were up approximately 23% year over year. And then condo prices were up by just under 15%, 14.7. And our rental numbers have been staggering as well. This is one example where you're looking at a one-bedroom condo, one-bedroom apartment has gone up by 25% year over year. But when you look at it from a larger perspective, since 2021 to year to date today, which was, mid-September was the last stat that I looked at, rental numbers have gone up over 66%. So we saw over a 30% increase in 2022, and year to date, we're up over 28%. So not only are your property values going up, but what you're able to get in terms of rent is also going up. Where other markets, property prices are going down because of the interest rates. So more people are shifting over to the rental market, which is driving up the rental prices. We're seeing a different scenario in Calgary for all the reasons that Kyle and Alex talked about a little earlier.